All right, guys, so this is the overview video for the TradeBuddy probability tool. Again, this tool is created by Cam, and I'm going to be giving you the presentation today. So today we're going to cover the three main pieces of the tool. So it's going to be a trigger, that's what starts the setup, internal number, which is where we reach on the inside of the range, and then external numbers, which are numbers outside of the range. So what time frame are we going to be using this tool on, or what's it useful on? We're going to be using it on the daily ranges, weekly ranges, and monthly ranges, and you'll see how we're using that. So we're going to be covering the trigger first. It's the beginning of a trade. So with this tool, you're going to have, for example, when we're looking at the daily range, it's going to be looking at a previous daily high and the previous daily low. So that's that range, right? And the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to back test. So it's going to be looking back, in this example, 250 days. So what it's communicating to you here is 132 out of the 250 days ran the previous daily high. 118 out of the 250 days ran the previous daily low. So which one is more likely? It's the high, right? It's 132 out of 250, or a 52.8% chance of occurring. Previous daily low is a 42.7% chance of occurring. Now, this is where we start to focus. So this would be an actual trade example that we're going through on how data is going to be used in your favor. So right now, you know, just based on the daily, that price is more likely to be bullish. So you could start using information on that. So say that price breaks that previous daily high. That is our trigger. So that's what we were covering just now. That's it. That's all you're waiting for. You're waiting for price to go up and hit that trigger. And that's all that we need to cover for that. So the next part gets into the retracement phase of this. It gets into the internal numbers. So remember, we just talked about this range. Now we're going to be talking about the numbers inside the range. So right here, and the way that it's measured is it's just cutting it into slices. So right, if we had this range from the bottom to the top, it would be cutting it into 10 slices. So the halfway point right here is 0.5. Now the internal numbers, right, it'd be 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, 0.10, right? I just used half to save time. And the tool will only be using 5 at a time. But it's going to give you the probability of how far it reached back. So if it's looking back over those 250 days, this data is coming from 250 days of data. So out of those 250 days, 40% of the time, it made it at least to 0.5. Right? But 80% of the time it retraced at least to 0.85 or 0.2, excuse me. And then 60% of the time it made it to at least 0.3, right? So that's what we're aiming for in those tools. Now, the sweet spot that we're going to look for is generally between 40 and 60%. That's going to be the data that we really look for. 85 is just a bit too high. Sometimes you just see them barely pull back and run, but we want to be generally around that 40 to 60% probability. And we'll cover all kinds of different examples, but that is going to be just a rule of thumb. So after it pulls back into there, we're going to be looking for setups on smaller timeframes at those levels, looking for an extension, right? We want to see price essentially go higher. Now, remember, why are we looking for a bullish trade in the first place? Because remember, we already have that data letting us know that it's more likely to run bullish. So that brings us to our third and final piece, which is the external numbers. So once it retraces, right, the internal numbers are for how far do we think that retracement is going to be. And like I said, we generally expect it to be in the 60 to 40% range. And once it starts, once it's already retraced and starts trading outside of that high, we want to start seeing, okay, how far should this likely go? And same thing as the internal, right? It's just like moving the fib on top of it. The external, we now just count 0.1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. And again, the tool is going to do all the hard work for you. It will tell you the exact percentage out of those 250 days that it hit these levels. So out of those 250 days, it hit 1.1, 85% of the time. So again, and the same, whether you're using the daily or the weekly, it's the same thing. So if we break the previous weekly high, we retrace to our internal numbers, and then we start looking for our external numbers. We find the probability that's between 60 and 40%, and we target that as a TP. So for here, you could target that 1.3 level because it has a 45% probability. Now, the setup overall would look like this. You're bullish in the first place. Here's your trigger that starts the setup. You retrace to your internal numbers. You start to get long between 60 and 40% generally. And then you're targeting a 60 to 40% probability on the external numbers. So again, remember, we have the internal numbers, which is inside the range, the external numbers, which is outside the range, and the trigger, which starts the setup. And so that's going to be it for this basic overview. Make sure you guys let us know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.